Forgive me because I am champing at the bit to get into this topic and drink some liberal tears. Because the way the media reacted to Trump even mentioning Greenland tells you everything you need to know about how the narrative machine actually works. We were seriously told, deadpan, no irony, that Trump talking about buying Greenland could be the end of the world as we know it. The end of the world over a real estate negotiation. And that right there is your first red flag. When the language immediately jumps from policy discussion to existential catastrophe, you're not being informed. You're being emotionally steered. This isn't journalism. It's panic theater. Think about it. Trump didn't say invade. He didn't say conquer. He didn't say roll tanks through the Arctic. He said buy, purchase, negotiate. Something countries have literally done throughout all of modern history. But somehow, when Trump says it, NATO officials start clutching pearls, media panels start whispering about instability, and suddenly we're one chyron away from World War III. That's not accidental. That's narrative escalation. Here's the part they never want to talk about. Greenland actually matters strategically, and that's exactly why the media freaked out. Because once you strip away the hysteria, people might start asking uncomfortable questions, like why global institutions are so desperate to shut this conversation down before it even starts. The Arctic is opening up. Ice is melting. New shipping routes are forming. Whoever controls those routes controls trade, leverage, and power. And the moment Trump pointed that out, the entire global commentary class lost its mind. Notice how fast the language flipped. One day it's Trump is reckless and impulsive. The next day it's Trump is destabilizing the global order. The global order. That phrase alone should make your ears perk up. Because the global order isn't about regular people. It's about institutions. It's about defense contractors, international finance, NGOs with billion-dollar budgets, unelected bureaucrats flying business class to conferences in Switzerland talking about stakeholders. You know exactly the types. Let's be honest. War is profitable. Fear is profitable. Instability is profitable. If you're sitting at the top. Media companies thrive on outrage cycles. Defense companies thrive on tension. Intelligence agencies thrive on expanded authority. Global finance thrives on volatility. And when someone comes along and threatens to rearrange the chessboard without asking permission, the system reacts like an immune response. That's why buying Greenland somehow turned into a moral crime. That's why anchors looked straight into the camera and talked about dangerous escalation. Because peaceful negotiation doesn't justify bloated budgets. It doesn't justify troop deployments. It doesn't justify emergency summits. You can't milk clicks, contracts, and control out of calm diplomacy. But panic? Panic prints money. And look at how NATO jumped in. Suddenly, there's talk of sending troops, exercises, posturing, all over a conversation that hadn't even reached a negotiation table yet. It's like watching a group of adults lose their minds because someone dared to ask, what if? That tells me the fear isn't about Greenland, it's about precedent. Because if the public realizes that global politics doesn't have to mean endless wars, proxy conflicts, and manufactured emergencies, then the whole scam starts falling apart. If people realize that nations can negotiate without bloodshed, that borders and resources aren't sacred when elites want them, but suddenly untouchable when citizens benefit, then the puppet strings become visible. And that's when they really panic. Because a population that sees through media alarmism is a population that's harder to scare into compliance, harder to push into supporting the next necessary conflict, harder to convince that sending billions overseas while their own cities rot is somehow moral. The Greenland freakout wasn't about Trump. It was about control. Let's talk about the end of the world framing for a second. Every single time the media uses that phrase, what they really mean is the end of our influence, the end of the old systems, the end of guaranteed relevance, the end of unquestioned authority. They're not afraid for you. They're afraid of you thinking independently. And here's the thing. Even if you don't like Trump, even if you voted against him, even if you roll your eyes every time he opens his mouth, you should still be able to recognize when the reaction is disproportionate. Because today it's Greenland, tomorrow it's something else, another crisis, another emergency, another reason you're told to stop asking questions and trust the experts. Funny how the experts are always the same people. Media talking heads, intelligence sources, NGO spokespeople, think tank analysts who just so happen to sit on the boards of defense contractors. It's a closed loop. They cite each other, amplify each other, and then act shocked when the public doesn't buy it anymore. So no, talking about buying Greenland was never the end of the world. What scared them was the possibility of breaking the script, a world where negotiations replace escalation, a world where America asserts interests without immediately lighting the fuse of global panic. That's what threatens the machine. And the more hysterical their reaction gets, the more obvious it becomes. All right, let's talk about the part of the Greenland story the media desperately does not want you to understand. Because once you see it, the entire end of the world narrative collapses instantly. Greenland isn't about vibes. It's not about ego. It's not about Trump waking up one morning and deciding he wants an ice cube on the map. It's about geography, power, trade, and control. Here's the simple truth they keep burying under panic headlines. Greenland sits right next to the Northwest Passage, an emerging global shipping route that's opening up as Arctic ice melts. That passage is going to do for the North what the Panama Canal did for the Americas, and what the Suez Canal did for Europe and Asia. And if you don't understand why that matters, you don't understand geopolitics at all. But somehow, when Trump points this out, suddenly we're told this is apocalyptic. No. What's actually happening is that a new trade artery is forming, and every major power on Earth knows it. China knows it. Russia knows it. Global shipping conglomerates know it. Defense planners know it. And the idea that the United States might want leverage over that route, that's what freaks people out. Because whoever controls major waterways controls global trade. Period. That's not a conspiracy. That's history. The U.S. didn't become a superpower by accident. Control of sea lanes, choke points, and trade routes is how influence is maintained without firing a single shot. That's why the Panama Canal mattered. That's why the Suez Canal still matters. And that's why the Northwest Passage is the next big fight. And here's where the global elite angle comes in, because this is where things get interesting. The same institutions that lecture you about climate change, borders, and global cooperation are absolutely terrified of national governments asserting control over real-world infrastructure. Why? Because unelected systems lose leverage when nations act independently. Think about it. NGOs don't control shipping lanes. Davos panels don't patrol trade routes. Global finance doesn't like predictable power. It likes managed chaos. And intelligence agencies, they thrive when everything is unstable enough to justify permanent expansion. A country calmly securing a strategic position without war doesn't fit the script. Trump's framing of Greenland was blunt, sure, but it wasn't insane. It was transactional, defensive, strategic. Greenland gives early warning capabilities. It gives Arctic presence. It gives leverage over a future trade route that will move trillions of dollars in goods. That's not apocalyptic. That's statecraft. But watch how fast the narrative flips. The moment this becomes about the Northwest Passage, suddenly it's not smart strategy, it's dangerous escalation. Why? Because if Americans start realizing that geography still matters more than Twitter outrage, then the media loses its grip. And let's talk about China for a second, because this is the quiet part nobody on cable news wants to say out loud. China is already investing heavily in Arctic routes. They've openly stated interest in being an Arctic power. So when the U.S. looks at Greenland, it's not aggression, it's deterrence. But instead of explaining that, the media pretends Trump is playing Risk in his basement. Because if they admitted this was about keeping America competitive, they'd have to admit something else too. That endless war isn't the only way to project power. And that's the real threat to the machine. Not Trump, not Greenland, not the Arctic. It's the idea that power can be secured without bloodshed, without proxy wars, without writing blank checks to defense contractors and then calling it democracy. You ever notice how every time a new strategic region opens up, the conversation immediately shifts to fear? Fear of instability, fear of conflict, fear of escalation. Almost like someone wants you primed for war before diplomacy even starts. Because war is predictable for the elites. War means contracts. War means media ratings. War means emergency powers. A negotiated purchase that strengthens national security without firing a shot? That's disruptive. So no, Greenland isn't about the end of the world. It's about the beginning of a new one. A world where the Arctic becomes a major economic theater. And the reason they screamed so loudly is because they don't want regular people connecting the dots. Once you do, the hysteria stops working. If this made you stop and actually think for a second, that's the whole point. This channel isn't here to scream at you or tell you what to believe. It's here to break the narrative and let you connect the dots yourself. And if that already makes certain people uncomfortable, then you know we're over the target. So do me a favor, hit subscribe, smash the like button, and share this with someone who still thinks every media panic is totally organic. Because the only way this works is if more people start questioning the script instead of sleepwalking into the next necessary crisis. I'll see you in the next one.